Tariffs are dominating headlines, shaping trade policy, fueling global debate, and shifting more quickly than many businesses can keep up with. Driven by evolving world geopolitics, these changes have real and lasting impacts on businesses importing and exporting their goods and services, on the supply chains they rely on, and even on the consumer. Joining me for this episode are Carla Stone from the World Trade Center Delaware and David Mathe with Export Delaware. Together, they cut through the noise and break down tariffs, their origins, and their uses, and offer resources to help businesses both large and small. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Delaware State Chamber's podcast, the Delaware Deep Dive. I'm Kelly Basil, COO of the State Chamber, and today I'm diving deeper into a topic that's been receiving significant attention this past year. It might even be the word of 2025, and that's tariffs. I'm very thankful to have two issue experts with me at the table today, so let's welcome Carla Stone, President of World Trade Center Delaware, and David Mathe, Director of Export Delaware. Thank you both for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
I'm really glad you are both here because this is a very complex topic, and I'm not even going to pretend to be able to meaningfully contribute to this. So I know a lot of people have been asking questions about it, trying to make sense of what's happening, even predict what will happen next. So I'm very grateful to have you both with me today. Before we jump in, for those who may not know you, I do want to allow you both the opportunity to say who you are and what you do. So, Carla, do you want to go first?
Well, the World Trade Center Delaware is the state's premier resource for import and export. We are part of the World Trade Centers Association network. There's some 320 World Trade Centers across the globe in almost 100 countries. We have over 15,000 employees, and that makes us very, very agile in answering your questions about trade and foreign investment. Our mission is to help you expand your business through trade, greater revenues, increased profitability, and you're able, when you engage in international trade, to be more sustainable because economies in one country may be different from another, ups and downs. And it also allows you to hire additional employees at higher wages. So we want you to grow.
Thank you. David?
I'm David Mathe. I'm the Director of International Development for the state. And so I'm kind of trying to oversee all things international that the state is involved with. One important part of that is Export Delaware, and my career started with export promotion back in 1993 with the state, so it's been an interesting journey to see how export promotion has grown among the states and within Delaware specifically, and then the other opportunities we have for international engagement with our partnership with World Trade Center Delaware. We have our corporate law is known around the world, so we have a group that goes around the world trying to market that and clear up misconceptions that people register as a Delaware entity for tax reasons. They do not. But we work very closely with the Delaware Prosperity Partnership in terms of foreign direct investment promotion. So it's a great ecosystem we have here in the state, and I'm happy and pleased to be part of that.
Great. Well, this is a Delaware podcast, so I feel like I have to ask you both, are you both Delawareans?
Yes.
Born and raised?
Born and raised in Hockessin.
Okay. What about you, Carla?
Corporate gypsy. I've lived around the world.
Corporate gypsy. I really like that. Okay, great. So let's just jump in. I really want to start at the beginning for our listeners. I already disclosed I am not an expert on tariffs. I know they're important when it comes to international trade and geopolitics. So can we just kind of break them down and start from the beginning, explain to our listeners how they came about, their purpose? I'll let either of you jump in first.
Go ahead, Carla.
Okay. All right. Well, tariffs, first of all, you have a number of different names: tariffs, duties, customs. When you come back to the U.S. on a plane, do you remember those forms you used to fill out where you had to list everything you bought overseas and put a figure on it, what it is, and a figure, and then you turn that in going through customs.
Right.
And you would either have to pay a tax or not, depending on what the item was and what the rate was on the duty. Well, tariffs is another name for a tax, and it's paid for by consumers when they purchase, bring it into this country. As soon as it comes in, it is subject or may not be subject to tariffs depending on the product or its value, where it comes from. So it is, as you said before, pretty complex. Mm-hmm. And the purpose of tariffs in the past, starting in the 1700s in this country, was to raise revenue. Mm-hmm. And you may have heard of the Boston Tea Party. That was a tariff. That was a tax. And the Americans were fighting against the tariff, against having to pay this tax on tea. Mm-hmm. So it goes way back in America's history. And really, up until the early 1900s, it was the primary source of revenue for the American government. Over 90% of the income from people in the United States that went to the federal government was in the form of tariffs. And that changed in 1913 when we started having an income tax, because tariffs, in fact, are quite regressive. Everybody pays the same rate on the same article. So for people of very low incomes, it is a much higher percentage of their income than is somebody who is at a very high level of income. It's been used for protectionism reasons, starting particularly in the 30s, going back to your history classes, Smoot-Hawley, when in 1930 the Smoot-Hawley Act was enacted for protectionist reasons to save American jobs. This was during the height of the Depression. Other countries enacted their own retaliatory tariffs, and it's believed that these tariffs actually deepened the effect of the recession. And then after World War II, we had what's known as the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or the GATT. And this established a worldwide system of tariffs and trades. It was to have predictability and to make sure everybody knew what the rules of trade were. And that was superseded in the 90s by what we have now, the World Trade Organization. And that covers about 98% of all trade. So that's where we are now.
Thank you, Carla. David, do you have anything to kind of elaborate on that or build off of it?
Well, I would just say that we deal with tariffs in the current context. So with exporters and the export assistance we try to provide. So for new to exporting companies that want to sell their widgets, instead of in the U.S., they want to sell them abroad, we have to work with them on pricing, how they need to price their product for distribution and sales overseas. And so the international tariff that they'll have to pay in whatever country they are trying to sell has to be factored in. So there's a lot of education that goes on the front end with export preparation, that the tariffs are an important part of that, and pricing your product correctly. And now with the current situation and the attention on tariffs, I think it's even more important in terms of product classification. So that's a challenge for a lot of companies. There are millions of classification codes, and you have to make sure you pick the right one, and the one that accurately describes what it is that you're selling, and what the tariff implications of one product classification versus another are. So there's a lot of education that needs to be done for companies that are looking to export.
So that makes a lot of sense to me. I would never have known before today that there are resources out there so that people can really thoughtfully put pricing on their products. But that applies a lot to people who are sort of entering this space. What about companies that are already established and having to react to the changes that are happening? Do you work with them as well?
Sure. So I was just talking with a company earlier this week that is feeling the pain of the tariff uncertainty. So they bring a lot of inputs to their final product in from China. And so that the pricing, the change that's going on with the tariff rate with respect to China has been a moving target. So they're very concerned, and they have an inability to price long term. So that uncertainty that currently exists is having a negative impact on them.
Okay.
But what it does do is it leads them to consider alternative sources. So they're looking to maybe they can source that product from another company or country other than China that might be a little more advantageous. But broadly speaking, I think it's the uncertainty that is really concerning to companies. But as we're seeing trade deals start to be announced, I think some of that uncertainty goes away.
So building off of the uncertainty, another piece of tariffs, they're a bargaining tool, essentially. So can we kind of talk about just the thought process behind that, how countries use this as a tool?
Well, currently, I think it's being used primarily to save industries or to protect it for protectionist reasons in most countries, rather than as a revenue generator.
Okay.
And because of that, every country's going to have a different viewpoint to tariffs. And if you are part of, say, the European Union, it's essentially a free trade zone within the European Union. But when you get outside of the European Union and you're bringing products in, then those products will be taxed, will have a tariff on them. So if you're bringing something in from the United States versus wanting to bring something in from, if you're in France and want to bring something in from Germany, that's going to play into the decision. The same thing with the United States. Do we have agreements with certain countries? And it may open up opportunities for some countries to export to some countries. It may close off for other countries because their particular consumer is not going to want to pay that higher price associated with the tariff. And I should say that the product that you make may be composed, as David said, of many components. So if you're producing, for instance, an automobile, you're going to have parts coming in from all over the world, and actually especially from Mexico and Canada, and those parts may travel across the borders, the three borders, a number of times as things are being assembled to the final assembly within the United States. And each time that happens, there is going to be a tariff. So there are actually different kinds of tariffs. There are tariffs that are ad valorem, which is associated on the value of the particular product. There are some tariffs that are based on the number of units. Say, bringing in wristwatches, there is a tax on a wristwatch rather than, say, the value. And I'm just pulling things out of air right now. So that in that case, something that is a very high value, if it's going to be based on the unit, it actually has less impact on a higher priced unit than it does on a lower priced unit. But this is why everybody is getting confused, because, and this is why you have to be very, very careful. It's not just the product, the components that go into your particular product, but it's also where they're coming from.
Right.
And that's important. And one of the things that companies can do is look at manufacturing within a foreign trade zone, particularly if that product is going to then be exported, because it offers benefits against tariffs. So there are things that companies can do to protect themselves. Alternative sources, whether in the U.S. or another country, or foreign trade zone, or substitution actually of the particular component. Can it be made out of something else? If it is plastic, can it be made out of homegrown aluminum or nylon or whatever it is? So you can look at the actual components going in versus where they're coming from, and are there substitutes for the components themselves?
It's a lot of decisions to make. I also hear too, though, and perhaps this is kind of a reasoning for what we're all witnessing right now, but speaking for Delaware and DPP especially, we hear a lot about manufacturing being a really growing industry here, and for the country, really, this reshoring movement. Is that a factor in all of this when it comes to, where the manufacturer sets up or the supply chain, because of these taxes, if you will? Is that maybe an incentive for things to be coming closer to home?
I think it is, and we witnessed this. Carla and I were both, along with DPP, down at the Select USA conference in Washington last month, and that Select USA is part of the Department of Commerce, and that's kind of their foreign direct investment arm. So looking to bring investment into the United States. Our booth had a lot of interest, and people were looking at getting manufacturing operations closer to their U.S. customer base to avoid the new tariff rates. So I think there's a big interest in that. That having been said, at that conference, there was I think it was the head of Toyota was asked specifically about, are you making decisions based on the current tariff? And he said, no, because our lead times are so much, they're making investment decisions 4 or 5 years out. And while that impacts it, it's not a driving factor. But the small and the medium-sized manufacturers are looking to they're looking at what it would cost to set up a manufacturing operation in the U.S. to be closer to the U.S. market, and they were admitting to us that they're looking to avoid the new tariff rates that are coming.
This might be a bit of a digression, but I'm curious now. So Toyota's thinking 5 years ahead. What are the factors that they're looking at when they're...
Well, I think he was talking about it's the workforce that's available, the relationship that they have in a particular location. All this stuff takes time, and it's about relationship development. And I see that on the export side. Carla sees that on the import side. You're not just doing business with someone. It's not just solely transactional. You're building a relationship to have an ongoing business relationship, and so it takes time, and there are a lot of factors that go into it.
Yeah, a lot of these are like decisions for the real long term.
Well, one of the things I think to remember is we were all hit with, we all learned about supply chains during COVID. And I think that people expected coming out of COVID that things would go back immediately. Well, that wasn't the case because it takes so long to build these supply chains. And once it's broken, it takes time to develop that relationship, to develop that alternative source of supply or customer or method you're going to get it to one country to another. The shipping lines, of course, were very effective. Containers, do you have containers? The price of containers skyrocketed. Are you going to bring it in by ship? How long? Is it going to take? What route are you going to take? Are you going to have to bring some of this stuff in by air? Once it gets to the U.S., into a port in the U.S., then how do you get it to the actual customer or to the manufacturing facility? So these are also parts of the supply chain. And as David said, it's long term. It's not immediate.
I feel like we've hinted at this a couple of times, so I'm going to jump ahead in my list of questions, but we keep talking about the consumer here. We've spent a lot of time talking about how this impacts the business and the business decisions, but how does this all impact what consumers are feeling?
I think we're in a wait and see mode. I think a lot of the current cost of tariffs are being absorbed by the companies themselves because they know that we're in a negotiation phase with different countries around the world, and so we're not at the final tariff rate that's coming. So I think there's been a desire on the foreign entities' part to absorb that cost themselves because it's critical for them to have access to the U.S. market. So I think they're waiting to see what the rates are finally agreed to in these individual agreements as they're announced, and they'll go from there. But it could obviously, yes, it could affect consumers at some point, but I think at this point it really hasn't.
Okay.
We have seen companies announce just this week, some of the major manufacturing automobile companies announced some pretty severe hits in the billions of dollars on their profits because of tariffs. They're blaming tariffs for that, but it was not translated to the consumer. If you remember a lot of these ads that have been on television or radio for the last couple of months, we're not raising prices. So the companies themselves have been taking the hits. If we could go back in history a little bit, the last time we dealt with tariffs like this, a situation like this, I'm thinking about the steel tariffs in particular. About 1,000 jobs were saved. Unfortunately, another 72,000 jobs in manufacturing that was related to steel, that these were users, were not saved. So many of those people went into other industries, but there is a trade-off here. And many of the jobs that are hit tend to be smaller businesses, smaller manufacturers that don't have the cushion that the larger companies do. So that's where David and the World Trade Centers come in, trying to make sure that we can assist them so that they're not going to be losing money and having to lay off employees.
So you talked about industries, and I would think you'll both answer my question by saying all industries. So try to give me a little more specifics, but especially with what we're seeing right now, are there specific industries that are being impacted the hardest? Or you mentioned small business, but even within that, there are many industries.
For me, on the export side, I'm seeing companies that have electronic components coming in from China, that's impacting them. Really, any inputs coming in from China, there's been a drop off. I was with a skateboard company in Newport recently. They import skateboards from China, they modify them, and then they resell them domestically and abroad. They said they have seen a significant downturn in the number of units they're bringing in because they're just not sure of what the final cost is going to be on the tariff. So, and I think it's downstream. People are hesitant to buy because they're not sure. So there's just this wait and see mode right now.
Okay, so it's more where versus what industry?
That's what I've seen. And I mean, I've got a very limited perspective on the export side of this, but I've seen that in the last few months.
One area that is trying to figure all of this out is the pharmaceutical industry, because in this country, a very, very large percentage of our drugs that come in from other countries, particularly generics.
Okay.
Most of the generics are made outside of the U.S. These are the ones where the patent's gone off, and these are made in very large quantities. They're very low cost, and this is a question: what's going to happen in the pharmaceutical industry? Also, a lot of components for pharmaceuticals, at the molecular level, basically, come in from overseas, from all over the world. We're making the shift to biopharmaceuticals all over the world. Where are these biologics coming in from? So there's a sort of wait and see on that one too right now, particularly since there have been statements from the government that they want to see these pharmaceuticals manufactured in the U.S. rather than bringing them in from overseas. So there's something of, do we do this? Do we not? Where are we going to be bringing these in? And in fact, the question becomes, is there a substitute for these? And I think that was something that David and I both deal with. We get questions on this all the time. Do you know another source? Just this morning, I was in a meeting with other World Trade Centers, and we're talking about, can we actually put out some huge directory, some app, if you will, of components, of products that people can just go to this app and find an alternative resource.
That's a very interesting idea, and I can imagine a lot of businesses would love to have a resource like that.
We have an automated referral system, and somebody coming to our website can say, I'm looking for XYZ widget. Go into our system, and they will get a referral to a Delaware company if there's one available. And we do hundreds of thousands of these a year.
Very, very.
And it's completely automated.
Wow, so cool. Thank you for sharing that. I want to talk about Delaware's place in all of this. So I'm going to read some stats, but this is from the Office of U.S. Trade Representative. But in 2024, the state exported $4.7 billion in goods. So maybe I should direct this right to you, David. But can you talk about just the significance of of trade to our state.
It's very important, and what we try and do is we're trying to encourage more activity of small and medium-sized businesses, and part of it is outreach. So there are a lot of companies out there doing international business that we don't know about. A little small company. So the one I met recently, I didn't know about them, but they've got a nice business going, and so part of our job is to find those companies, let them know that we exist, that we're a resource that can help them grow. You look at the trade numbers for Delaware and our export markets. We look at those as somewhat of a guidepost in terms of market selection that we want to target. But the reality is you have such a diverse group of small businesses in Delaware that export. We don't have critical mass in any one particular sector to drive activity. I work very closely with my counterparts in other states, and here we have a group that meets regularly and talk about how we do things in our respective states. And I've, the 30 plus years I've been doing this, I've had a very close relationship with my counterparts in Pennsylvania, and they have, a whole slew of overseas trade reps. They do multi-sector missions. They'll have 20 locomotive companies going abroad to do something. We don't have that kind of scale in Delaware. So it's always a diverse group of small companies. So it's hard for us to pick markets. So we're really trying to work now with the World Trade Center to really promote individual Delaware exporters going abroad.
Okay.
So we have monies that are available that we can help companies do that. We do organize missions at the state level. And in the past, we've done export specific missions, and they're always very hard to recruit because I'm picking a random country and then I pick a random week out of the 52 of the year
and hope it works
and hope I have enough
Right.
Delaware companies that meet both of those criteria. So we do missions now that focus on other things, whether it's a DPP mission for foreign direct investment, whether it's a mission to promote Delaware's corporate law overseas. We work closely with the universities in some of their globalization efforts. So we'll go to a particular market and then we invite exporters to come along, one or two. But we're really making a concerted effort to focus on the individual company. Where do you need to go? How can we help you get there? Because that really helps that company. So me picking an arbitrary market and an arbitrary week may or may not help the company, but we're really trying to meet the companies where they are and how can we facilitate them doing more business.
But I imagine a lot of, especially small businesses, don't know where they need to go.
Sure.
So how do we help them figure out what's the best place for them?
You're teasing a future webinar that we're going to be doing with World Trade Center in the fall.
I did it by accident. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have one of our overseas reps in France works with a U.S. company that has a product that works with new to export companies and will help them do an assessment and come up with the top 5 potential export markets. So we're going to have a webinar on that in the fall so that Delaware companies can take advantage of this and help them decide, because oftentimes they don't know where they need to go.
Or even that they should be looking.
Right, and that's kind of our broader message. You absolutely should be looking globally. Anecdotally, whenever we go overseas, Delaware companies are very well received. There's an interest in U.S. companies and U.S. products. So it's nice being at the sub-national level because a lot of the noise that comes out of Washington is kind of over our heads. So when we're in a specific country, the companies we meet aren't focused on what's being said, nationally. They're looking, hey, this guy makes a widget that I need, and try and foster that relationship. So it's a nice space to be in.
Yeah, that's a lot of connecting of a lot of dots.
Yeah.
Sure, and that's why we exist, because we bring different resources to bear. So World Trade Center has their sweet spot of services that they offer to companies. Export Delaware, we have ours. We have federal partners at the Department of Commerce. We all work together trying to help the companies expand their global reach.
Great.
One of the things I want to mention is we've talked a lot about products because this is primarily on tariffs, but there are 2 things I want to be sure to talk about. One is we export services as well.
Thank you. It was one of my questions.
We export services as well. And these can be IT services, consulting, education. Education is a huge export for the United States, whether it's training or university students coming here from overseas. It becomes an export. Tourism is considered to be an export. All these people who come to the United States to visit, and they spend their money here in Delaware. We're known as the summer cap capital of Washington. So that's something else. These are exports as well, services. The other thing is that for small companies, one of the things that we really promote is becoming an indirect exporter. And this is, you make a widget that can go into a larger widget. And so you might make a very small, say a ring, some kind of rubber ring, and that goes into a tube that is used in the pharmaceutical industry that is exported. Well, you're not you're doing an export. You're actually an export, and you are responsible where your ring goes. Even though it's a very small component, you become an exporter, even though you're selling to an American company. You are not doing the actual boxing of it to go overseas, but you're still an exporter. And for small companies, this is very often the way to get their toes in the water.
Okay.
Find out who has the big contracts. Is it somebody you can go to and say, listen, you make tubes, you make chromatographs, you make whatever it is. I make something that can go into that. And I make it of a better quality. There's no reason for you to import that from another country simply to export it again. We'll cut that supply chain. We'll make it a much closer supply. We believe we have a much better quality. And I have to tell you, just came back from Angola from a huge conference, over and over again, I heard from other companies, from people in many countries saying, we want quality. We've been burned on the cheap. We want American quality. So this is one thing that small companies can be doing. Produce a quality product that goes into a larger product that then gets exported.
That's an interesting note, because that kind of speaks to like the American brand as a whole. And that's even something to advertise globally, which I imagine you both do on a regular basis, is just talking about, wanting to pick American made, or even Delaware made specifically. So I'm getting the signal that we're almost at time. I do want to give you both the opportunity to just kind of say any sort of final words to sort of wrap up this conversation, something that we may not have hit on that needs to be said.
So I was at a meeting back in early April of my counterparts from the other states. Our national group was meeting on Insurrection Day, and it was really interesting because half of my colleagues were running around with their hair on fire going, the world is ending, my God, what's going to happen? Those of us were a little more circumspect and said, we don't really know what's happening, so let's not panic.
Right.
We had some briefings from some foreign diplomats on that day, and obviously that was the topic du jour. And I thought it was really interesting because the diplomats were like, look, there's been an imbalance for decades, and this issue has needed to be addressed. It's being addressed. It's not the end of the world. I thought that was really interesting. And as we've seen, the sky hasn't fallen. So one of the companies I met with recently that at the beginning was just like, my gosh, that has a lot of inputs from China, is now seeing that, okay, his main issue is not that it might be a high tariff rate. It's just, what's that number going to look like? If it's a high number, he can deal with it. If it's a low number, even better. But he just needs the certainty of what the number is so he can plan. So I think as we're moving along, and as these deals are coming out, I think there'll be some opportunities for Delaware companies. So, new markets that might have a low tariff rate. As I said, my experience has been there's always interest abroad for U.S. made products, and Delaware products are always well received. So with this new environment into which we're entering and new tariff rates, Carla alluded to it earlier and said that there might be new markets that we don't know about for Delaware companies. And so I'm hopeful that is going to be the case. And I'm bullish on the future for Delaware exporters.
Well, it almost sounds like, too, it kind of forces innovation, which is always healthy.
Indeed.
Carla, any final words?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned innovation. I was going to bring up, we're sort of an innovation corridor here in Delaware. And people want the new, but they want the quality. And here in Delaware, we have a reputation for innovation going back hundreds of years. And I think that's an advantage that we have. That plus the franchise, the being the corporate capital of the world. You put those two things together, and it gives us a tremendous advantage globally. And as I said, I was just in Angola at a humongous trade and policy conference, the U.S.-Africa Business Summit. And people were coming up to our booth, to the World Trade Center Delaware booth, because they wanted to talk about Delaware. They knew Delaware. Some of them thought of us as the chemical capital of the world. Some of us thought of us as the incorporation capital of the world. Some of us thought about us as pharmaceuticals and fintech, credit cards. I heard about credit cards. Their credit card coming from Delaware. So we have a lot of recognition outside of the state of Delaware. We just have to figure out how we can put it all together to take advantage of it in this environment. And I think we have a leg up versus other states, other locations in the U.S.
That's a great comment, Carla. It's an opportunity that we all, I think, see in front of us and are ready to take on and package it up, put a nice bow on top. Okay, so moving on to our final segment, the Combo Connections. It's just a nice little Delaware tie to our episodes, but I want to give you both the opportunity to give a shout out to a person or a company in Delaware that you think just deserves a little love. Carla, go first.
I'm going to mention Port to Port International because what they do, and Annabelle Paniote is the founder and president of it. This is a company, Annabelle figured out all these containers coming in filled with produce, filled with bananas coming from South America, Central America, Latin America, and they go back empty. And she said, I can fill those with American products. I can fill them. And she figured out a way to fill them with vehicles. So that's a Delaware success story. And everything from motorcycles to ambulances, cars, trucks, all fire trucks are exported through the Port of Wilmington because of this idea. And so those containers don't go back empty.
That is very interesting. Thank you for sharing. David?
So mine is Samori. They're a small company down in Magnolia, Delaware. They do digital hardware and software, digital forensics, and they participated in one of our export missions late last year to Italy. And for the investment of their money and time to go to Italy and make connections, they're looking at multi-million-dollar export orders as a direct result of that. So they're a small company in a beautiful bucolic setting in Kent County, and they're exporting to the world.
I can tell you we at the State Chamber love them. They participated in our Coolest Thing Made in Delaware contest earlier this year, and they did a fantastic job kind of capitalizing on the contest's process. I'll give a shout out to Instructure. You mentioned the port, but that's a huge tool for Delaware. The gate to the world for us. And so Instructure is doing a lot of work as we, or I should say most of us know, to expand the port and reinvest in it. And so I'll give them a shout out. So before I let you both go, I normally say if someone finds what you have to say interesting, how can they get a hold of you? But I think in truth, there are so many companies out there that need to get a hold of you. So how can they find you?
They can go to export.delaware.gov for me.
Great. Carla?
www.wtcde.org.
Great. And if you have any questions, suggestions for future episode topics, or just want to get in touch with me or any of my colleagues at the State Chamber, you can find our information at dscc.com. You can also find the State Chamber on social media. We're on Facebook, X, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. And with that, thank you both for joining me. Have a great day.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Delaware Deep Dive, brought to you by the Delaware State Chamber of Commerce. Before we sign off, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen. I know podcast hosts say this all the time, but your support is invaluable, and it helps other listeners easily find us. I'm your host, Kelly Basil. We'll see you soon.